Looks like we're rolling. We're going to do the abbreviated intro.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's the abbreviated intro to this show. That's right. Welcome, everyone, to the Podcast Engineering Show. My name is Chris Curran. I produce podcasts for all kinds of companies, big and medium-sized. And this intro's a little weird without any music under it. You guys really want the music? All right, I'll play it. And maybe you like the grunting, too. Ow! I think I pulled something. All right, well... yes! Welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show. Every week on this show, we bring you podcast production techniques on a silver platter. I have a background in audio engineering in the music business, and since I entered podcasting about 6-7 years ago, I noticed a huge lack of audio skills in podcasting, and that's where this show can help. So if you listen and learn, you can implement the best of what you learn here. Your podcast will sound a lot better, and you'll spend less time producing them. And here's the most important part. I believe that you can produce really great sounding audio. I really do. And of course, Barry is with me as I'm trying to fade the music real quick. You all love Barry, and of course, some of you named Jason DeFilippo kind of make fun of me for repeating some of the same sound clips. But of course, Barry's with me. Barry?
Yeah, oh yeah.
There he is. All right. Well, anyway, Barry's here. And of course, Podcast Engineering School, the next semester starts January 8th, 2019. That's right. So we do a semester every quarter. And anyway, you can go to podcastengineeringschool.com to check out all the details of Podcast Engineering School. And wow, we're basically right at 50 students. 50 people have taken and graduated Podcast Engineering School, which is really cool. It's a small step in the right direction. Anyway, today we have a secret special guest. He's a dad of 5, right? 5 kids. I'm a dad of 0. Maybe I am a 0. All right. He's from Omaha. You're from Omaha, right, Jim?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. He's the director of talent sourcing at Gallup in their Omaha, Nebraska office. You're a Microsoft insider. What does that mean, Jim?
Oh, it just means I pay attention to what's going on in Windows.
But didn't with Windows 10, they said, okay, that's the last one? We're done?
Well, not really.
Okay.
No, they said that, but that's not really true.
Okay. I didn't think so. Of course, he's a gadget podcaster at theaverageguy.tv. That's right. Go to this website, theaverageguy.tv. And you're also co-host of Ask the Podcast Coach with the Mr. Heralded, lovely Hall of Fame podcaster, Dave Jackson. Wait, Dave Jackson. All right, we got some cheers there. But who am I describing to you? It's Jim Collison. Oh, my God. He's here. We finally got him, 107 episodes. All right.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. That makes me feel big and important. I'm not sure it's warranted, but I appreciate you having me on.
Well, Barry's here. And Barry, do you have any advice for Jim? What is Jim going to need in this episode to really have a good appearance, to really come off really well and have fun? What is Jim going to need?
You're going to need a couple of horses or a couple of mules.
Either one is fine, Jim. So just,
I'll see what I can dig up. I'll see what I can dig. I am in the Gallup studios. So Gallup, horses, I don't know. Maybe we'll get there.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I keep hitting my Barry clip and I'm missing. I'm whiffing today. I don't know why. Anyway, that is just acceptable, all right? Just so that so Jim, normally we do the speed round first. We want to know, and it's kind of cool that you actually have 2 studios where you do recording. One is at the Gallup studios and the other one is at home. So let's do the speed round. I mean, speed round is just basically take us through your equipment real quick, like literally within 30 seconds. Just tell us, okay, I'm talking into this mic, it's plugged into here, I record it on this software, and I do post-production here, and I upload it here. Just give us 2 speed rounds real quick.
Yeah, actually, they're both very, very similar. So ATR 2100s and both set up for the microphones, right? Those go into Mackie mixers and FX Pro 12 here at work, FX Pro 8 at home. We use Google Hangouts almost exclusively, so pretty easy setup there. Run these things back into earbuds. I use a C920 for the video. We got Rode arms. I mean, pretty easy, but all the right stuff that works for me. Both I mirrored one studio from the other, so they're very similar.
Yeah, so you basically do everything on video. You do video recordings and video streaming, and then you take you take those files and then create your audio podcast from that, correct?
Yeah, right. We say we're live first. So we really do everything live on Google Hangouts because that just pushes to YouTube Live. And so we have everything I do is live with a live audience. I just found it's a better way for me to podcast. I get great audience feedback. I get questions from the chat room. For me, that's what works best. It just happens to record it both audio and video. And then again, like I said, I strip that audio out for the podcast. So pretty simple.
Yeah, so one question I have, and I always think about this because people have told me in the past, oh, you should stream your podcast live or something, and I probably could, but then you would just probably see my head, moving around like an idiot. But
right, yeah, talking head.
So then I'm like, well, then is it really worth it? So do you? Oh, and the other thing is, if I did anything on the screen, like if I'm like, oh, you see this? Look in the top left corner of the screen here. You see that? Like, I always worry that if I do that on video, then when it goes to the podcast, the people on the podcast are going to be like, what do you mean look at the screen? This is an audio podcast. Do you ever have that problem?
Yeah, it's a problem. You have to be just conscious of what you're saying on video. We'll even sometimes remind ourselves, when we're talking that way. It's like, oh, yeah, we've got audio listeners. Okay, let's explain that better. So, yeah, you do run that risk of doing it. I get very little feedback from my listening audience that says, hey, you're talking too much to the video, right? So we've gotten better at it, or it doesn't matter as much as most people think. And we just roll with it. And so, Chris, we talk about our chat room in all our programs a ton, right? Of course, if they're not there, when somebody's listening to it, we're talking about them typing things in. Those people can't see that, but it seems to add to it. So I get very little feedback on that from the audience. Like that's a bad thing. Yeah, we push those live shows to YouTube, and I have actually a live channel, so it's completely separate from the recorded. Once I edit the video, I push it to a different channel. That way I can have two different subscription options on that. Somebody can subscribe to the live because that's unedited, uncut, all the crap is in there. Or they could subscribe to the recorded channel if that's all they want to get. So I believed in giving my audience everything that I could, right? They can listen live, they can listen to the edited, they can watch it live, they can download the video RSS to get it. I mean, I just try to give them, I don't want anybody to say, I couldn't find it, I couldn't listen to it. So we put it everywhere in just about every form I can do.
Right. That's pretty cool. And when you're talking about comments on the air, I've watched some Twitch streams. Of course, Twitch is a little bit of a different animal, especially if someone's gaming or like playing chess or something. But a lot of times on Twitch, the people will be, I watch a lot of chess streams on Twitch, and they'll be playing chess and watching the people comment, and they won't read the comments. They'll just answer the comments. And that, to me, that's always weird. Like, I always like when the host sort of repeats the question out loud and then gives the answer. Because if I'm not looking at the screen, I don't know what he's responding to, right?
Yeah, no, there's two problems when you have a chat room. You mentioned one of them. And so I am really, really careful to make sure I read everything. So I'll say, hey, Chris in the chat room said, and we'll read that, right? And then answer it. So every single time. The other problem is like when Dave and I started doing Ask the Podcast Coach, and that was kind of new for him, this live taking the chat room, he would allow the chat room to interrupt him in the middle of the thought. So he'd be saying something, then he would be reading or looking at the chat, and it would allow him to interrupt him. And that's kind of disruptive in a podcast format, right? You really got to learn to kind of think all the way through or speak all the way through a thought, let it complete, then come back around to the chat room. And I see Twitch as well. I see a lot of, I think that's kind of a common mistake in media of letting it interrupt you. It's still going to be there. It's not going anywhere. Wait, finish your thought, get all the way through the sentence, come back around, introduce who's saying something in the chat room, say what they said, and then answer it. It's all going to be there. You don't have to rush right to it. But it is a real common problem when you first start doing it that way.
Right, and I guess the streamer thinks that, oh my God, I see this comment right now. The person who commented is going to expect me to answer right now. But you think the people who are writing in comments live, you think they're okay with waiting a minute or 2 or 5 minutes for the answer?
Yeah, totally. Okay. Yeah, they're totally okay with that. In fact, sometimes, you get comments that aren't really that good, and you just leave them out.
Right.
Like, it's okay. You don't have to answer every single comment that comes in. And so we let some go. I just don't. Sometimes, it depends on the show. I've done live shows with 150 people. That chat room is pretty unmanageable.
Right.
And so you have to learn to kind of let things go. Pick out the good ones, let the rest of them go.
Right. All right. So right now you're at work, you're in your office, or you're in the studio. Is it like a common podcasting studio in your office?
Well, we just moved. I was in a conference room for the longest time. For about 4 years, we had a part of the building that wasn't being used. And so I just took this big old conference room and I was in it. Had good lighting. It had great sound, really good connectivity. Well, they started moving people to that part of the building. So they kicked me out of there and gave me a new, little smaller room. And they just finished outfitting it. So they painted the wall the color that I wanted. So the background would be there, would be the color I want. They just installed the Eggcrate audio foam on the walls for me. So it kind of dampens it a little bit. I've got Cowboy Studio lights in here to kind of help me with the lighting. They bought me a big 50-inch TV that, so when I'm looking at the guests, I have my camera out in front of the monitor, not behind it, not on top of it, but right in the center of it out front. So when I'm looking at the guest, it forces me to look at the camera. And so some new things when we moved into the studio, they gave me some brand new studio.
That's cool. All right. So there you got your ATR 2100, and I'm assuming you obviously got that because it's just easy to plug in and it sounds good, right? Did you do any mic shopping to choose that?
We tested a bunch. I had been a podcaster before. I started podcasting at work. I did it at home, and I had bought 2100s back in the early 2010 or so, and just really loved the mic. Versatile, sounded good. Didn't have a gigantic sound field to it, so it was in a home setting. It doesn't pick up everything. A cricket farts outside. It doesn't pick up those kinds of sounds, right? So I really liked the mic. So when it came to work, we had to buy a bunch of them because we were actually setting up a bigger studio. And so not just my mic, but we were shipping microphones to people all around the United States. Every time we had a guest on, we'd ship them a mic, give them a return label, have them ship it back. And the 2100s, as cheap as they are super durable for us as well. And I must have bought 30 of them. So, it was durability versus cost in the 2100. And we bought some 2005s as well. Fit that bill really, really well. They would survive, 30 times shipping it, plus at a $75 or $50 price point, I could buy a bunch of them and I wouldn't be out a ton of money. So that was, we kind of landed on the 2100s because it was that sweet spot of value and durability.
Cool. And so now I'm wondering how the mixer fits into your studio setup, because you have your ATR 2100. I'm assuming, maybe you're not plugging it in USB. Are you using the XLR cable for your? Yeah,
we are definitely coming on XLR. I did not. USB recording is not my favorite, especially with these 2100s. The audio is amazingly quiet. It coming back to me, I didn't like that experience. And so, I wanted to route this through. This is something I'd done at home. Run it XLR into the board, and then I come off the board, the phone, out of the phone jack. And I actually, here in the studio, I don't do this at home, but because at the time I thought I was setting up a studio where we were going to have guests in the studio, I bought a headphone amplifier that has 4 channels on it, so that I could run headphone jacks out to everybody in the room, right? That was be sitting around the table. So I don't really need that. I could come out of the phone jack and it would be fine to get the audio that I want out. But I do run that into a 4 position headphone amplifier. And then I run that into some earbuds here so I can hear myself back.
Got it. And then the Mackie, is it a USB mixer?
It is. Yeah. Both the FX12 and the FX8 are USB, and they're great. They do, you don't have to do mix minus. It has an audio pass through so that if I'm playing something on my computer and I wanted you to hear it, Chris, it's one button and it'll play. Like I don't have to do mix minus. I don't have to have cables running all over the place. It was really designed, I think. I don't think they did this on purpose, but I think this Pro Series was designed with the podcaster in mind. It works really well for that. Turn the effects off. I don't do a lot. I don't mess with the mixers, the equalizer very much. I don't worry about the different effects that are, in fact, the effects are muted and turned off. It's got like 50 of them, whatever. But yeah, it's set it and forget it. I kind of got it on. I do the volume from time to time. A little bit, the FX12 here, a little bit of an overkill. Again, I thought I was building an entire studio when I bought it. So, I wanted it's got 6 XLR inputs into it and some lines in, and I thought I was going to use all those. In the end, I could have gotten away with a smaller board. Kind of nice to have it, though. One of the channels did go bad on me, and so I was able just to move it down the line, use the next channel, and not worry about it.
So pretty much if everything you're doing is just you, doing a live stream on video, you're really just plugging your one microphone into the mixer and that's it, right?
Yeah, correct. Just in the studio, in most cases, just me. Now, I have done some voiceover work here for Gallup as part of my job, where I've had people in the studio. We set up a second mic. I put it on a stand and I can record them that way. I don't do that very often, but it does give me the ability to do that. So from time to time, 2 times a year maybe, I have folks in the studio to do some voiceover.
Got it. And what about mic technique? Because your sound, the room you're in right now, is it sort of like you said it has the Eggcrate foam, right?
It does. Yeah, it's a standard office when you think of like an office. Got a big heavy door on it. We've got curtains. I have curtains on the window to kind of block out the distractions in this Eggcrate. But even before we put all those things in there, it wasn't bad. This just really deadens it now. I've even noticed as I've come in today, because this is the first time I've recorded since we put the Eggcrate foam on the wall. And it does sound really nice and flat for me, which is cool.
Nice.
Wasn't bad before, but it's really good now.
And how about your mic technique? Do you really focus on, staying close to the mic or staying the same distance from the mic and all that?
Yeah, I'm a especially with these 2100s, I'm kind of a 3-finger guy. So I try to get no farther away when I'm talking than 3 fingers from, put together. Like if you think like Scout's Honor, 3 fingers away from the mic. It is one of those, you can't always do it, but I do try to get right on it. If I get too close, it gets, you get a little too much bass in there. And so I work hard to kind of stay. Yeah, there we go. Little, oh yeah. So I work really hard, especially on video, to keep a consistent distance away from my mic.
Nice. All right, so that's your at work setup, and your home setup is really almost exactly the same. But tell me about the room itself at home.
Yeah, the room at home is your typical podcaster in a basement room. I'm not going to lie. Nice. It's kind of the laundry room, right? And so the washer and dryer are not far from me. I actually, when I first started podcasting, I flipped the desk around so you wouldn't see the washer and dryer in there. It was just a spot. It was an open spot when I first started doing this, 9 years ago. I didn't know I was going to do this a lot. And so I bought some things and got set up there, and I've just never really wanted to move it. So it's kind of an open room, no ceiling, right? It's just an open basement. You can see the floorboards from, if you look up, the furnace runs right by me. It's your kind of typical Midwestern basement kind of setup. The beauty is these 2100s are so forgiving that even in there, I can get away with some fan noise. I can get away if the furnace comes on. The washer is probably a little too loud, or the dryer is probably a little too loud. I wouldn't want those running. But the 2100s do a nice job of not picking up any of that background noise. I had been on a Blue Yeti, and that thing was super sensitive. And you could hear my chair squeak, and if I cracked a knuckle, it would pick it up. And so it was good to move away. Great mic, good sound, for studio setup, really, really good. But I found the 2100 just way more forgiving and better for me in what I do.
Right. Yeah, it reminds me, I recently saw a couple people on Twitch who were streaming, and they have it's a Blue Yeti type microphone. I know one, these guys called the Chess Bros. They're actually Blue is one of their sponsors. So they have a Blue mic. It's not a Yeti. It's a probably a little
like
more
a Snowball.
higher end. No, it's even higher end. Yeah,
Okay.
It's like a condenser higher end, and they have it. And so, but sometimes they're talking into the end of it when it's really a side address mic, and it's so then when they come to the side and they just like make an offhanded comment, the offhanded comment is louder than their normal talking. So it's
it's good. It's important to have that good mic technique and know where a lot of people make that mistake on those Yeti mics. Again, pretty good mics. You just got to know how to use them.
Yeah, and I always want to tell people like that, but I don't know how to tell them because I don't want to come off like like I'm complaining or like I'm. Yeah, you know what I mean.
It is hard. I know there's no easy way to send that podcaster an email and say, hey, love what you're doing, but could you just talk into the right spot on the mic for me? Although, Chris, when I first started podcasting, I did a few things here at work that I just came off a laptop microphone, and it was early. I was just trying to get content. I was super excited about podcasting. And I did get a comment from one of the listeners early on that said, we might have, and this was actually, it was a work podcast, and the comment was from one of my coworkers. And he was like, we probably have some better mics at Gallup that you could use. I mean, that's all he said, right? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I probably shouldn't do that again. And I didn't. From that point on, I always make sure I had some kind of mic because that laptop mic's not just not good enough.
Right. So you're a Microsoft insider, and I really want to ask you about software running on Windows machines. Now, for years, actually forever, did all my production on Windows machines, and just about 9 or 10 months ago, switched over to Mac. And the switch over for me was really good because I can actually use audio hijack and loopback to really bring in all kinds of different people into one machine and route the audio, and it's just awesome stuff you literally can't do on a Windows machine. But I'm curious. I'd like to ask you, what software are you running on Windows in terms of your DAW or your audio editing?
Yeah, so for the editing piece, because I use Hangouts to record everything, so I'm just basically all my recordings in the cloud via YouTube. But when I bring it down to edit it, and this is going to sound crazy, Chris, but so I actually do everything in Audacity. It just was my first one. I learned how to use it. It was good enough. I like the editing in it. I've actually purchased Audition, Adobe Audition, and have messed with it for a while. Had it for, I don't know, maybe 2 years. And I just didn't. It was so powerful, and there were so many different options. And at the end, I'm like, I think I'm just going to go back to Audacity. I really like that. Now, I've gotten into a rhythm now where when I strip the audio out of the audio, I do that with Audacity. It's got an FFmpeg encoder in it that can allow me to save that video file as I use AIFF for an Apple lossless format. And then I drop it over to Auphonic I import it into Auphonic. I use their web services to do that. I should just buy their software, but for $11 a month, it's easy to get all my podcasts run through Auphonic at that point. And then it creates an MP3 for me that does their magic leveling and all that stuff. So I don't mess with, I leave everything as native as possible. I let Auphonic clean stuff up, and then I push that thing out to my audience. So if for me, when I'm doing Home Gadget Geeks or Cyber Frontiers, my podcast, that works for me. Here at work, I have a more traditional video and audio editor. So he uses Final Cut or whatever for the video. He uses Audition for the audio and puts it out, and he does some tweaks to it. So we do it both ways. On the video at home, I still use Windows Movie Maker, which is a really old video application or editor. You really have to work hard to get anymore. Microsoft's not developing on it. You can't get newer versions of it, but it works so well for me because it's so freaking easy.
Right.
And so I'm going to use that thing until I absolutely can't.
Right.
But I try to keep it simple.
Which is good. There's something to be said for just getting, knocking out the production
just getting the job
with tools
done, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, right on.
But I find it interesting. Sorry, in Audacity, you're actually saving your audio files in AIFF format.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was a format that allowed, like Wave, it really doesn't, at the time, this was not 9 years ago, at the time, it was a format that would allow me to save the file in its complete entirety. No, not stripping anything out, not cutting anything off, right? Whatever. And I was exporting that out. And then over the years, I've done a variety of things to kind of clean it up. I actually, for a while, I was doing the edits in Audacity. I know this is going to sound stupid, but I'm just bear with me for a second. Then I was importing it into Audition and running it through the filters in Audition, because the filters are better in Audition than they are in Audacity, I felt. And then I was exporting it out using the MP3, using the Fraunhofer in Audition because I don't think Audacity has the greatest MP3. I think it's using Lame. Mm-hmm. And at the time, Lame wasn't very good, or you could tell the difference between Lame and the Fraunhofer encoder. Mm-hmm. So I was using Audition to get it into the MP3 I wanted, right? Well, then Auphonic came along. And I was like, dang, I could do everything in one step, right? Except the edits. So Audition in the edits, drop it off AIFF, suck it into Auphonic and let them do their magic, and then they kick it out as an MP3. It's a great workflow. It takes a little long. Like my upload to Auphonic takes way longer than it should, and I don't know why that is. I should ask those guys. But it doesn't matter. I throw it over there. I do some more workflow, write my show notes, edit some video, whatever, right? And in an hour or so, the thing is done.
So what's interesting is you're relying on Auphonic, which is just a great tool. I mean, it's amazing what Auphonic can do, and it's totally awesome. But what happens if let's say your guest or whoever else has been recorded on the show? What if their audio is like especially bad? And do you go through any extra steps to try to clean it up or fix it or anything like that?
Yeah, if I need to. I work really, really hard to make sure it's not garbage in, garbage out. So I have the advantage on most of my podcasts especially on Home Gadget Geeks, I almost always interview podcasters. So they've got the right equipment. I don't have to worry about that sound. Every once in a while, I may interview somebody who's coming in on a lapel mic, something like that. I did have, maybe a year ago, I had that happen. Auphonic worked hard to bring that up. It wasn't great. I kind of just chalked it up to, this happens every once in a while, and let it go. But I have not had a lot of trouble with guest versus me audio levels being different. Part of that is in Hangouts, Google works really hard to make sure those sound levels are the same. And you can see if you're ever doing a Hangout and you open up your sound settings, as you're talking, it's adapting all the time. It's just constantly adapting to you, moving it up and down based on what it's hearing. And so because of that, probably 97% of the time, I just made that number up, by the way, probably 97% of the time, it works perfectly. I get really good sound between the two of us. Now, it's compressed. It's not the best sound on Hangouts. There's other issues with it, right? There's some wizardry they do behind the scenes. But again, I get very few complaints, right?
Yeah, one of my definitely my biggest complaint about Google Hangouts is the ducking thing. When two people talk at the same time, it sort of tries to duck one under the other, and it almost mutes one person, and so you lose. People are just talking. If they happen to talk at the same time, you lose one, if not both of them. It's
you are 100% right. For whatever reason, and I hear that from time to time, we let that go. That's one of the things for convenience. We just decide, every once in a while, I'm going to have to say, hey, say that again for me, in an interview where we stepped on each other. But it hasn't been too much of a barrier to my audience. And so I continue to put that up as a shortcoming, but it definitely is.
Yeah. And like you said, if it happens a little bit, it's not that big of a deal. And as a good host, if you need to ask someone to repeat something, that's fine. But yeah, like if you had 5 or 6 people on one podcast or one stream, then that it would be an even bigger problem. But yeah, that's one reason why I still like using Zencastr as my main VoIP recorder, because Zencastr does not do that ducking thing, whereas the others still do, like Ringer and Squadcast and those services. So, but yeah, like you said, for ease of use and getting it done. So this is the thing. I want to move into, well, first I want to ask you about I did ask you about your studio at home. I want to move into all the different platforms that you're posting to, because I saw one of your older videos and you were describing your, not just post-production, but like literally posting and like social media and different websites and all this stuff. And I was like, my head was spinning, man. I was like, oh my God, Jim is a freaking rock star. So tell us about that. Like, where are you posting all your stuff? You're posting in like a million places, right?
Yeah. Well, when I started doing Ask the Podcast Coach with Dave, it was one of those things I felt kind of responsible to be able to kind of keep up with the industry, right? Just to use these platforms and these tools. Because if I was going to talk about them on a podcast, I wanted to be able to know what I was saying, right? And at the time we started Ask the Podcast Coach 5 or 6 years ago, there was a bunch of different platforms that were, coming up as offering hosting. And so I thought, what the heck, if they got free plans, I'm going to try them all. And so when we think, I had been on Podamatic, so that was the very first one I was on. I moved off and did self-hosting after that, but I had a bunch of listeners out there. I didn't want to lose them, so I just kept it. And then I went with Spreaker. They came along, and it was like, okay, this is interesting. I'll sign up for their free plan. I'll use that. So I went to Spreaker. Of course, we were making a big fuss about Soundcloud. And I got to figure this out. I got to be on SoundCloud. So I went on SoundCloud. Then there's a whole bunch that popped up, right? So Mixcloud, Audiomac, Audio Boom was one. Actually, I was on that and now I'm off. Their plans they went weird on me, so I dropped them. There is Mixcloud, and then podcast. I think it is podcast.com. I have these listed on my site somewhere. And then of course, archive.org is one. So that in a nutshell is kind of the places that I go to when I'm thinking about getting these things, scheduled. The interesting thing was, Chris, is that for the longest time I was getting onesies and twosies, but in the last year or two, some of them have taken on a life of their own. Now, I send out one tweet a week about these platforms. It's not like I'm hammering people, come listen to it here. I'm doing no trickery. I'm doing no advertising, right? So none of that stuff is happening. But on some of the platforms, I'm getting 300, 400, 500 listens a year. And actually on one of the platforms, I think it's Mixcloud, I think I have 3 or 4 podcasts that have 400 or 500 listens. And those are all coming from the community. So it's been an interesting experiment. I mean, I'm kind of glad I did it. Would I recommend everybody do it? I don't know. It takes you maybe 5 minutes to upload to them. Like, why wouldn't you? But that's, again, it's another thing, like in your podcast, production workflow, it's another thing to do. And so it's worked for me. It helped me, kind of stay on top of the hosting industry and what's going on there and just be able to talk about it. Like I said, I'm not sure I recommend it for everybody, but it kind of works for me.
So, and your main podcast feed right now, where are you generating your main feed? Is it self-hosted?
Yeah, self-hosted, and actually a buddy of mine started his own host company. It's called Maple Grove Partners, and he's a good friend, and he's a tech guy, and he just built kind of his own infrastructure, and so we host it out there.
Cool. And then you just spend time uploading it everywhere else, and all those places are free, basically, right?
Yeah, they are. No, they are free for now. I have paid, and I think I might even be paying right now for more storage on Podamatic, which was where I started, and that's where I originally started. But I have 125, 130 listeners that are still hitting that feed. And then, I thought, well, okay, I'm not going to abandon if I get listeners. I've asked them to move, but they're not moving for whatever reason. I'm not going to abandon them.
Right.
And so I've gone back and forth on Podamatic. Sometimes I've paid for it. Sometimes I haven't. Just kind of see what's going on. I don't want to make it hard for people to listen. Like, one size doesn't ever fit all. And so I want to give people the ability to listen wherever they're at. And so I'll do whatever it takes to get it there.
So now when you're posting on all these platforms, how are you monitoring downloads? Because I know, like for me, for this show, I just use Libsyn, and of course Libsyn sends to a bunch of different places, but like my stats in Libsyn pretty much show me my, the combined numbers of listeners that I have. Is that the case for you, or do you have to look at these different platforms and add up your listeners?
Yeah, well, first of all, you have to care about it, and I don't. So numbers are something I just don't care about, to be honest. I mean, I kind of do. Engagement is what's more important to me. How many emails am I getting from listeners? What's happening on Patreon? When I put something out in a podcast, how many responses back do I get? That's what's really important to me. That's true engagement. So the numbers, the download numbers for me are just kind of an exercise in average. Like, well, kind of where am I at? And if an advertiser asks, I got to kind of have a number. So I kind of pay attention to it, but I don't really care. When I'm posting on Saturday mornings, when I'm posting my podcast to those sites, for the ones that have stats, I'll go just take a quick look. So I'll open the stat, I'll go to Mixcloud, I'll go to my dashboard, I'll look at the stats really quick just to see how things went last week, and then I'll upload. So it just gives me it gives me kind of an idea. That's where one day I went and looked, and we'd done a grilling and barbecue show on our tech show. And apparently there's a huge correlation between guys who like tech and guys that barbecue, because that show went freaking nuts, right?
Wow.
And, I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't looked at the numbers. And so it is good to look at them to kind of get an idea, because now we do that show twice a year. I talk a little bit about it a little more because I know there's this correlation between tech and barbecue. Again, weird, but it just exists, at least in my audience. And so it gave me some indications. But do I try to add them all up and have exact numbers? No, I don't spend, to me, there's no ROI in that. So I don't spend a lot of time doing it.
Right. I like that. I agree with you as well. Like for mine, I glance at them now and then just to see like, hey, am I, just to have an idea. And like you said, I'm much more, I would much more like people engaging with me, and of course people enrolling in my school. That's what really
no, right on. That's a really big mark of engagement for you, right? Are they enrolling?
Exactly.
And if they're not, I mean, the other thing to look for is a 0, right? Because then there's a problem, right? If typically you do 600 to 800 and then all of a sudden it's 10, well, okay, now you're like, okay, do I have a problem? So it is good to look at them. I don't want to give anybody the impression I don't pay attention to them at all. But I'm looking at them for different reasons.
And I'd like to just confirm with Barry here. Barry's here with me, of course. Barry, and if you do have any problems, you just call Dave Jackson, right?
Oh, forget it.
I'm telling you, that's it.
Chris, I actually, the other day I was having a problem. I don't know, what was it? I was having a problem with something. And so I sent Dave a note. I said, hey, are you up for some free consulting?
Classic.
So, and he said yes, which was great. So we had a little chat.
We have recording of what he said. When you said, hey, are you up for some free consulting? Dave said, hold on.
There's no way.
Oh, sorry. Wait. Dang it. Oh, I missed it. All right. Dave said, hold on. Oh, my God. I hit the wrong button again. This is what Dave said. Hold on, Jim. He got out his lightsaber. Then he helped you, right?
Nice. Yes.
Oh, my God. I whiffed twice.
That's all right.
That's terrible. Of course, I'm going to leave it in, though. Why would I?
Yeah, no, right on. You should.
Edit that
should.
Years ago, when you first got started, I'm assuming your setup was different. You probably used a different mic and different mixer, or was it literally the same?
No, the very first iteration was that a friend sent me that blue Yeti, and I went and bought a really expensive mount for it and a really expensive windscreen for it, and I was using that, and somebody from one of my listeners sent me an email and said, hey, we can't see your face in the video. The mic is so big. And so that was one of the other reasons I kind of switched over to get kind of a more reasonable, mic, plus the noise stuff. But yeah, no, actually, even before that, I was using a Plantronics headset, like you'd see at work. Uh-huh. The very early versions were this Plantronics, single ear microphone that comes down, and it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. So that was my very first USB. No, I couldn't hear myself back. That was the very first thing I did.
Nice. All right. Now, I don't think I told you about the two next segments of this program that we're going to do right now. The first one's called Nightmare Session. I want you to just, if you can think real quick about maybe a session you've done or a stream you've done or a recording where it was like nothing went right and it was just crazy huge problems and maybe even just didn't allow you to even continue doing it. Have you had a nightmare session, Jim Collison?
Yeah, we did a session for work. I do a session out of India. We have our Delhi office in India. And in that night, we were interviewing, which was a high-profile customer for them, and they really wanted this to go right. But the connection kept dropping. And so about we get about 10 minutes in, it would drop. We'd have to reset it and start over. And I kept saying, maybe we should do this another time. And they're like, no, we got to get this done tonight. And I think we did 4 edits on that. And then at midnight, because we started that podcast at 11:30 to make sure we were in the noon hour for them. And then at midnight, the power in the building went down. I mean, it just went black. And so I was like, God, no matter what I do, it's just not working. So there's my nightmare for you. It was awful.
Wow, perfect timing with the background music. You finished right at
I worked on it that way.
Oh, yeah, right. Barry, have you ever had a nightmare session?
No way. You crazy?
Yeah. No, he hasn't. He doesn't let that happen. But
because he's Barry.
Literally everything went black. Just boom. That's scary.
Yeah, it went down. It wasn't down for long, to be honest, but it did. When you think about equipment, the next day I sent an email to our tech support guys and said, I need a UPS in the office now, right? I need a battery up here. And so they brought one up and I've been running off a UPS ever since. So one of those important lessons, that would have saved me because it wasn't down for very long. So it would have saved me from having to reset everything back up again. But we installed a UPS shortly after that.
So the UPS is what, universal power supply? Or uninterrupted?
Uninterruptible, yeah.
Got it. Uninterrupted power supply. And so just for listeners who don't know what that is, it's like a big battery, if you want to think of it that way, that you hook stuff up to where if the power goes off in your house or in the building, that UPS will power your computer and stuff. But here's my question, Jim. What about the internet connection? Would you still be able to have an internet connection with the power off?
Yeah, so at home and here, I don't worry about it here, but at home, I actually have a separate UPS just for my networking gear. So for all the home network, plus the modem, plus the Wi-Fi router, all that is on a UPS as well. It's on a separate UPS. So yeah, and as long as, I don't have somebody, sneaking in my backyard and cutting the cable connection, because cable won't go down when the power goes out. In most cases, you're fine. So yeah, you can, I recommend having everything on a UPS. That way, if you do have a little brownout, right, or something, the power just blips for a second, a squirrel gets fried on the line, everything doesn't go down. It will, if you lose, your PC stays up, but the internet goes down, like here, I don't know if it would, with Zencastr, I don't know if it would reconnect. With Google Hangouts, it definitely would not just automatically reconnect. So important to have that equipment on a UPS as well.
Got it. All right. And your next purchase, this is a wonderful segment. Do you have any idea what your next purchase will be in terms of, obviously, podcast production?
Yeah, that's a super great question. It will probably be a PC, just to be honest. The PC I have is a 3rd gen Core i7, and it's older at this point. Now, it's still pretty great, but one of the things we didn't talk about is I actually have at home, I have a 2 PC setup. So I don't podcast with just one PC, I use 2. And I actually use an audio connector, a physical audio connector between the 2 to take the sound, the audio that's coming out of one, and it goes over to the input on another, and then I broadcast that out to Spreaker, right? So I've got an audio-only feed that allows me to do that pretty simply. It also allows me to unify the video feed as well for Google Hangouts. Makes that a little bit easier. So at work, I have 3 PCs here. I have a big monster that's running what we're doing right now. And then because of some software limitations at work, I actually have 2 PCs. One runs the video feed, the other runs the audio feed. So I'm kind of a PC guy on this, right? So I got a bunch of PCs in here. So next thing, I'll probably build my own. It'll probably be a monster, and then I'll move everything down the line, right? I'll take something off the end, a slower PC off the end of the workflow, and then move everything down the line. That's just kind of the way I am.
Right. Okay. And so how you get at home, you said you have two PCs and you get audio from one PC to the other. How exactly are you getting it from one to the other?
Yeah, so think about it like a flow of water for a second, right? And so I'm taking the PC and I need to get Spreaker it needs to monitor the audio in feed, right? So where is that coming from? What's coming out of the audio out feed on the PC that has all the audio and video? You and me, say we were doing the interview.
Right.
You and me are on one PC. That's where the sound is, right? It's coming out of the speaker port on that PC. Well, I just take a physical audio jack, come off the port, the speaker port on where you and I are talking, because our sound is unified there, right? It's not just me or it's not just you, it's both of us. Then I come out of that and I go into the audio in on the computer where Spreaker is waiting to hear that unified audio that's in there. And it's just a little hack that allowed me to do that without trying to run everything on a single PC.
Right.
You know, there's some trickery. You could use voice meter and there's a variety of trickery things that you can do to run that in. To be honest, I could probably come off my mixer and do that as well. Because the mixer has that unified audio. I didn't actually just thought of that right now.
Got it. I was just going to ask you that actually.
Yeah. No, you could do it that way. But it was just in the early days, it was just a trick. And then at home, I'm actually able, because of the way I do it, I'm actually able to do all of that on I've got my PC, you and I are coming in, it's the podcasting PC. Then I'm starting that Hangout on the second PC number 2. And I can actually come out of the speaker port on that computer and go back into the microphone port on that same computer and let Spreaker come off that feed. So that's another way of doing it. Again, there's other ways to get it done, but that's the way I found, the easiest way I found to get it done. And it just kind of allows me to get a unified audio signal out to Spreaker with a very little headache.
Right. Now with 2 PCs at home and 3 at work, what are your practices in terms of like before starting a recording? Do you like literally restart every machine, and what's your rigmarole that you go through every time?
Yeah, that's a super good question. At work, I actually reboot after every podcast. And we do 3 a week. So when I get done, my routine is to shut everything down, just restart them so that they're rebooted and exactly where I need them to be. It also, if there's an update waiting for them, it also runs that update right then. So they should be in the best possible, the best possible place they can be here at work. I don't want to mess with that. I want to be able to come in the studio because sometimes I'm in a hurry. I come in late, or I didn't get I was in a meeting late. I didn't get in here as soon as I wanted to. I need these things to be ready to go. So at work, I reboot them every time. At home, I actually just follow the normal reboot schedule for Windows for whatever they do. So they get rebooted every couple weeks. I really don't have any problems with them. I just don't have issues with them not rebooting them all the time. So for now, I reboot them whenever Windows updates.
Nice. And this reminds me, another question I just thought of. Since you are the Microsoft insider, on a PC, are there like certain like system processes that are just happening in the background that are just taking up processing power that maybe podcasters could turn off on their PC? Anything you know of?
Well, I prefer to overpower the PC as opposed to try and buy something cheap and optimize it. There's just too many things that can happen in Windows that take things over. And so my preference is, Core i7, Core i5, maybe a Core i3 at this point, if that's all you can afford. But and then I recommend 8 to 16 gig of RAM on those things. Today, solid state hard drives are cheap enough. Everybody should have a solid state. So I kind of overcome Windows with hardware, right? I'm going to just throw as much hardware at it as I can. I'm a PC guy, so that doesn't hurt me. Like, I like that, so it's okay for me. I throw a little bit more money at it that way, but I think it's a lot less problems. I think podcasters make a gigantic mistake when they try to underpower everything. It's never going to work. Like, if you buy cheap equipment, it's not going to work well for you.
Right.
So I always recommend, buy a step or two above what you really need. It will last longer, to be honest. You'll be happier with it. You'll get better quality out of it.
You won't age as much.
Yeah. Well, there's that too. But it is one of those things. I'm a big believer. If I'm going to spend extra money, I'm going to spend it on my hardware, especially my computer hardware.
Right.
That just pays off for me.
Right. And I know you're doing everything with YouTube Live, or really it's Google Hangouts. It's not actually YouTube Live. Those two things are different, correct?
Well, and so the Hangouts are the front end for YouTube Live. So YouTube Live, you could use OBS or Wirecast or some of those, and you could go directly into YouTube Live. Hangouts is just the easiest option for me to get me and a guest in there. And then once it's recorded, of course, then it goes directly to YouTube.
Right. Got it. Okay. So that's your normal thing. But do you ever do any Skype recording? And are you familiar with, because I know on a Mac, the Skype recorder is the Ecamm call recorder. That's for Mac. And on PC, everyone used to say, oh, get Pamela. But Pamela, on a PC, Pamela hasn't been updated for 4 years. And Steve Stewart just told me this. And he recommends some other one. Are you familiar with any Skype recorder on PC that works and is good?
Well, because I have 2 PCs in my studio, right? And I can start a Skype connection on one, and then I can connect another Skype connection to it, right? So I'm connected. I have 2 different accounts, and then I bring the guests in, right? So when I do the recording, the second PC, remember the second PC has an audio jack that goes out of the speaker and into the microphone. And so I don't need to record Skype directly. I can just start Audacity or Audition and hit record. It's listening on the speaker port. It's listening for anything coming in on the microphone port,
right,
and recording it. And so I can get, when I do Skype that way, I can get a pretty clear, pretty well, sounds pretty good. Now, it's single channel. This is the big drawback to it, right? It's everybody on a single channel. But for what I do when I'm recording Skype, that's good enough for me. And so I'm able to do it using Audition or Audacity. Right now, since I've given up my Creative Cloud subscription, I use Audacity in most cases. Works pretty well.
And this is separate from the Google Hangouts live streams.
It could be. Yeah. No, it could be. I don't often do those together, but yeah, no, it could be. It could be completely separate if I wanted to do it that way.
Oh, but you could do them together. So you can have Skype running on 2 machines and do the Google Hangouts.
I think you can. Yeah. I think they'll share. Okay, because it's just audio. I don't know if I would, I would turn all the video off on Skype.
Right.
Skype video is awful. So I wouldn't do it that way. But yeah, I think you could do both at the same time. Chris, I've thought about, we're using Zencastr today. I've thought about any of those services. I could be running this as well as the Hangout, and I could get the sound here this way and have it, at the end, get probably better quality that way. Now it's another thing, and it's another service to buy. I just have decided not to yet, but I totally could have that running and a Hangout running at the same time.
Right. And I just want to clarify for everyone listening, when you're talking about your 2 PCs and going from one PC to the other, and you're saying that you're coming, let's say, speaker output of one into the microphone input of the other, you don't have any audio interfaces. Like, you're literally coming out of the headphone jack in one of them and going into the little tiny microphone jack in the other one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. All hardware. And it's actually, in my book, it's the easiest way to do it. It's nearly bulletproof. Whenever I would do it with software, something would always go wrong. Right. And I'm not a big fan. I don't like software mixers. I don't like doing audio in the software, where I'm manipulating it. I really want that to be as close to bare metal as possible. So I like that option. And it's one of those little $7, audio jacks that you buy at Walmart that you would, use in your car to connect your phone to the, to the aux in. It's that same cable. So it works for me, bulletproof. It has been nails since I started using it.
Yeah. So so just to clarify, that's something you can do, but and you have it set up properly, so that's why it sounds good. But actually, it's really easy to sort of to just not have the output volume of one and the input, the mic level input on the other one set properly. Because if the output of one computer is very low And then on the other computer, when it comes in, if you have to really crank up the preamp to boost it all the way up, then you're going to introduce a ton of noise. So actually, the way you send it is vital. Yeah,
totally.
That's good.
Yeah, totally. We did a ton of testing. So when I was first doing this, we set it up, we ran tests, we made sure the volumes were just the way they needed to be, and then we didn't touch them ever again. It's like, just leave it. It's going to be that way every single time.
Yeah, but also make sure
you got to test.
Right, but and in addition, make sure you go to all the settings and write down what the settings are, because if something happens to that computer and all of a sudden everything is wacky, it'd be real nice to have a little recall sheet of like, okay, what were those settings? What was the mic input volume on computer B and all this? And I have to say, this reminds me a little bit of a conversation I had with Steve Stewart, because Steve Stewart is right now going through podcast engineering school. And he actually asked this question because we were talking about audio interfaces. And I told everybody in the class, the way you get audio into and out of a computer is with an audio interface. And, like a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2, and there's a million audio interfaces, the Mix Pre 6 or Mix Pre 3 and whatever. Yeah. And Steve Stewart asked me, well, why can't I just go out of the headphone output of one into the microphone input of the other? And I told him, well, you can do it, but I did tell him that that's, in terms of what we're trying to train people to do in podcast engineering school, is like totally professional grade everything, right?
Yeah, right.
So in terms of professional grade, I wouldn't consider that professional grade. Like, I would want to come, out of an actual audio interface into another actual audio interface. But anyway, so I had to explain it to him, and he got it. But the thing is, if you set the levels right, it'll work just fine, for sure. And that's what you're doing. So.
Yeah. Well, in the Hangout audio is already degraded some. And then, so you're not really, the Hangout audio is the weak link in this. If everything was 100% digital and we were doing it differently, that probably would not be the way I would want to do it. But for what we do in simplicity, works just fine for what I do. So.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think we covered everything. I think this has been awesome, Jim Collison.
That's been good to be on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So theaverageguy.tv, that's where everybody can find out about you.
Yeah. So if you want to see my tech shows, theaverageguy.tv, and then if you're interested for Gallup, which, this has been an interesting experiment for me, is to podcast at work. We have a lot of podcasters. We don't have a lot of podcasters podcasting at work.
Right.
And so I get a lot of questions about how does that work and what does it look like and how do you convince your executives to let you do it? Some of those kinds of things. If you want to see that, you go over to coaching.gallup.com. That's our coaches site. We kind of talk to and speak to about 15,000 coaches all around the world, and talk about our products and do marketing and that kind of stuff. And so it really gives me a good way to kind of communicate with everybody and speak to everybody around the world in real time and live and recorded and all that good stuff. So it's a great way to do it. It's I think it's the best way to do, really customer service. Just make a podcast. And so that's what we do. It works out pretty well.
There you go. Jim Collison. All the links will be in the show notes. All right. So Jim, the last thing at the very end of the show, both you and I are going to yell out, "Sound great." Okay?
All right.
Right when the music kicks in, we'll go "Sound great." Are you able to yell in that room you're in, or is everyone going to look at you funny?
They're going to look at me funny, but I have a plan. Go ahead.
All right. Yeah, just get close to the mic. All right. So thanks, everybody, for listening to the Podcast Engineering Show. Go check out Jim Collison. We'll see you next time. And, okay, right now, Jim, go. Sound great! Ah! Yeah, oh yeah.
Walk away from me where you can play that part so well. What you're playing out on me now. You like to lose control where it's quite a feeling, isn't it? They're floating, drifting down now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? It's gave up on me where so change your game and give a break. Say I wouldn't understand now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? Oh yeah, I say now it's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. What do you want me to say? It's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. You react so actively. I want you to know you will never waste me through. I've gone over all we've been through. Doesn't seem that long a time now. Things we did still hold that meaning. It doesn't mean it's still the same. You're pushing me away. The work your theories now where you're getting worked up on you now. You work your way around somehow now. Yes, it hurts me now where that you don't talk to me at all. Now that these words have split apart now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond?